Nationalism remains a taboo concept in the minds of the many, and the mainstream makes sure to portray it as some demonic force to people that are simply uninterested or don't bother with politics and philosophy. However, nationalist movements across the globe are taking over entire nations, and with increased tensions between races and ethnicities, this is very heartwarming news. Considering the current state of affairs in the world today, there is however one issue, and that is people sitting on the fence, reluctant to move towards nationalism, and often justifying their inactivity, or as some would call it cucking, by saying patriotism, not nationalism. This, although a noble attempt at moral grandstanding, is nothing more than lying to oneself and buying into the fear-mongering that the mainstream media promote in order to avoid what nationalism really is. First, we must define and identify the features and logical foundation of both patriotism and nationalism, and understand what their ultimate goal is, and later identify if it is possible to be a nationalist and not be a patriot at the same time, which would demonstrate a clear impasse between the two ideas. So, patriotism. If we make a quick Google search, we learn that patriotism is, as defined by Wikipedia, patriotism, or national pride, is the ideology of love and devotion to a homeland and a sense of alliance with other citizens who share the same values. This attachment can be a combination of many different features relating to one's own homeland, including ethnic, cultural, political, or historical aspects. And by a dictionary definition, the devotion to, love of, and loyalty to one's country. Now, since we have the definitions, we must extract some conclusions that can be made from the positions of patriotism to compare them to nationalism later. Patriotism holds loyalty to the country, and in Polish we say to sacrifice for it, meaning to sacrifice oneself for the country as the country and its people are the highest good. There is also an emphasis on values and groups and the idea of a homeland. Often values are held in line with culture rather than being a separate entity. As such, we have defined several features of patriotism. Country and its people are the highest good. Cultures, or values, must be shared. Love and loyalty for the homeland/country. Now we must compare this to nationalism, which for all its demonization is not something any patriot would consider radical at all. However, some core concepts of nationalism may lead to necessary conclusions that many in today's society simply find distasteful. Nationalism, as defined by Wikipedia, is: nationalism is a political, social, and economic system characterized by the promotion of the interests of a particular nation, especially with the aim of gaining and maintaining sovereignty, self-governance, over the homeland. The political ideology of nationalism holds that a nation should govern itself, free from outside interference, and is linked to the concept of self-determination. Nationalism is further oriented towards the developing and maintaining a national identity based on shared social characteristics such as culture and language, region and politics, and a belief in a common ancestry. Nationalism, therefore, seeks to preserve a nation's culture by way of pride in national achievements and is closely linked to patriotism, which, in some cases, includes the belief that the nation should control the country's government and the means of production. Nationalism is also defined as loyalty and devotion to a nation, especially in terms of national consciousness. The logical conclusions we can make about nationalism are: loyalty to the nation, sovereign in the homeland, culture, self-determination, nation is the highest good, love/loyalty to the homeland. When one looks at both these values, they don't seem radically dissimilar and often seem to simply shift the focus. However, upon closer inspection, it becomes clear what patriotism and nationalism really are. Patriotism is a way of living, a methodology for life in a society, and generally one's personal attitude towards their country. It stops at the individual and small group levels, and when it decides to become political, it must necessarily transform to nationalism, because if it doesn't, it holds no political ideological value. Nationalist ideas and principles are the logical conclusions of patriotism, often conclusions that many would like to avoid or simply not think about, such as culture being something that is intimately tied to a nation and ethnicity, and as such, the definition of patriotism simply cannot exclude these immutable characteristics from its definition. Therefore, there must be a physical origin, a manifestation of culture, which contains a set of values which are held by and manifested by a specific ethnicity or people. This ethnicity forms a group, one that is necessarily exclusive, particularly if they are going to preserve any of their values or culture, they must be sovereign. To be sovereign, they must necessarily again be exclusive. To be the owner and sovereign of your home, you must be the sole sovereign of that home. If anyone that comes in can make administrative decisions or even become the owner of the home simply because he stepped a foot inside, then in what world are you a sovereign of your own home? However, some might see this great demonstration of love transform into hate. It might seem hateful and wrong to discriminate, to set others before others simply based on immutable characteristics. But is it? Why bother setting one's own mother before someone else? Why bother caring for your family more than the homeless? Isn't that then necessarily wrong? Those are immutable traits of those very people. Yet we all know that it is not wrong, and it is also consistent to discriminate in such a way. The reason for this I will cover in another video, in my series on my personal manifesto that I'm writing. However, for now, let's leave this on the argument of how absurd such a morality of endless love is. As such, patriotism, if it wants to become a political ideology, must transform itself into nationalism. Nationalism is therefore simply political patriotism. Nationalism as such is no more evil or no better than patriotism. It is not some evil entity that will come to get the other, to kill him and his family in his sleep for simply existing within a certain region. However, nationalism mandates and demands that the people, the natives of the country, come first. And what is so radical in that? What is so evil in demanding that the homeowner own the home, and he alone own the home? What is so evil in his exclusive care for his family, rather than that of his neighbors or that of some on the other side of the neighborhood? Is it not evil to demand that he not have his rights, not be allowed to exist far from others if he so chooses? Is it not evil to demand that he share his sovereignty and that his home no longer be his own, while others still retain theirs, unchanged and unmolested? It has become clear to me that in the world, in order to be finally at peace, we must first become nationalistic, even isolationistic to some degree. How can neighbors be good friends without a strong fence, a strong boundary between them? But in order to achieve this world, we must first reframe the way nationalism is portrayed. Rather than being some evil boogeyman ideology of hatred and destruction, it must return to its roots and back into the good graces of the public through reframing it as an ideology of love. Because that is what it is. To love one's people, to love their culture, to love the land and the waters that run through it, to love its uniqueness. Nationalism is an ideology that loves and protects its people, and should any threat arise, then it must be eliminated. To love is to hate that which threatens that which you love. Nationalism mandates that the people be protected, that they be sovereign, that the culture remain unmolested, that one have a right to his own home and his homeland, that he have a right to protect it and to sacrifice for it. Nationalism is a love for something more than material. It is to love the soul of one's own people, without which they will simply disappear, die off, and be cast to the ashes of the wind, never to be seen again.